Hi, I'm Matt with Schematical, and with me as always is Dominic DeMarco. Thank you for joining, Dom.
Happy Tuesday. This is the classiest lemonade that I've ever had. It's not a
All
cocktail.
right, cool. Well, let's right now, AI agents and all that stuff are all the rage, and they are empowering. One of the good things happening is they are empowering people with less technological background to be able to access data, parse data. So what happens if you're an engineer that gets asked to access some data, or if you're someone that's, C-suite and you want to get access to that data? Could you just give your agent full access to the production database? Probably not.
Grant Star where?
Yeah, exactly. So that's something I'm seeing more and more of as this evolves, is that request. We want access to that data. We want access to that data, and that's great. Now, obviously giving an AI agent that could do a lot of crazy things and hallucinate a bunch of fun stuff, and access to read, write, create, drop, do anything to your database, bad idea. Additionally, even if you let it just have read-only creds, it could spam the database with very inefficient queries and slow down the database, meaning that it slows down your end user experience, which is a death trap online. So you don't want that. So what's the next step?
Clone the database?
You can clone the database and give them that. Now, remind you, these things read tokens, or use tokens to read to the database. So let's just say you give it a dump of the database every night, then it has more and more records each day it's got to parse through. It'd almost be more efficient to give it kind of a "this is what's new today" type of situation. So one thought, if you've got the time and the technical chops, is to create your own custom MCP servers that have some
Constraints?
Yeah, exactly. Where it can recommend something, but then a human has to approve it. It can't actually just take direct action. But that is time consuming, and it takes a while. So another thing that you could do is to do data lakes, to have a data lake. And
So pause and explain to me, like I'm 5, a data lake.
right. So let's just say, say you wanted to track every click and every interaction since the beginning of time that you could use. You could keep that in your production database, but then that's a whole bunch of extra stuff. Like your end user doesn't need to know every click. It doesn't need to know most of the time what transactions took place 5-10 years ago. They need to know the information they need to know, the product and what's its price, very quickly. Same, or if you've got a project management software, they just need to know the open tickets, right?
And I think a good example in this context might be show me every sale that's ever been done on the website.
Right. Now your end user doesn't need that data, right? They need to know what they've bought, and probably mainly what they've bought in the last year or so. But they don't need every sale possible. So, but your business intelligence group, which wants to extrapolate patterns like, hey, do we sell more when it rains? Do we sell more on the Tuesday before the Super Bowl? Do we, should we need to be stocked up on this? They might need that information, but you don't want that information clogging up the disk space on your main database, nor do you want the queries to it to slow down your main database. You want that to be processed on a different set of hardware. You've got two options.
And could you also, this is kind of a rhetorical question, strip out PII from this data lake such that you can go through it and not risk?
Strongly recommended that you would rip out PII. Very, very good. It's almost like you read my post on this. But yeah, that's, you'd want to anonymize the data to an extent, like, basically all user, would not their user's email in there that could be accessed. And you want it like, anonymized to a point where it's some hashed version of some unique ID that's associated with the user, but not linked back to humans.
They say, so you can still track all of the purchases by user, anonymized username.
Right.
But you could never turn that around to be able to contact or understand or actually identify in any meaningful way who this anonymized user is.
Right. Like you can tell what their zip code is, and a couple of other user attributes that would be extracted, however many you want, but nothing that would get it down to the person. You'd be playing a who's who game of everybody in that zip code. So yeah, you'd want to anonymize that. There are two main ways to do this, by the way. So just you create the secondary database, and there's data lakes and data warehouses. Data lakes are typically unstructured data. That means that you store it, and maybe you do a little ETL, like you transform it ahead of time. But it's not necessarily like just definitively all in there for one purpose. That's if you had very efficient reports that you needed to have data out of all the time, you might want to use something like a data warehouse, but those are more expensive. They're typically on all the time. Data lakes you can do, especially my favorite combination, which I'm going to write more about, is AWS Kinesis to Firehose to S3, store them as Parquet files, and then query it using AWS Glue and Athena. Basically, it stores, long story short, it stores all these events in S3, which is extremely cheap. You can store, as long as you're not constantly writing or updating them, which you're basically writing an event stream of everything that happens. So if a record gets created, updated, deleted, you write the event and what changed to the data lake. So now you've got all this information, all the transactional history of every single record, which is way more dense than you want to store again in your production, source of truth database. But it's great to have in case, we need to rebuild everything from scratch and figure out where it was, or you wanted to run, in like AI models to predict the fluctuation of prices of your inventory. But
so
then
this could be useful for your marketing team, your AI agents, your anybody that wants to dig through the data that you want to keep a bit of a wall between them and your customer identifiable information.
Sure, vendor relations. What's the price of the inventory going to be? What's the wholesale price before you get it retail? When can we get the best deal on it? All that stuff. There's not there's not a whole lot of departments that couldn't benefit from it, depending on what business you're running is, I guess. But so, the good news is that the compute cost in there is extremely low if you use the S3 Athena, because it only runs any compute costs when you're actually running a query against it. And so if you say, hey, I want every record going back to 1992, and I need this information, then it can do it. Now, it can't slow down your production database, which is great. You give someone who doesn't know infrastructure and doesn't understand how to write extremely great queries, you can give them access to Athena. They can't write to it. They can't, update records. They can't, ideally, if you've done your job right, you're not storing PII in there. Then it's they can't accidentally do a data leak, which would be extremely expensive and embarrassing. So, but they can still get access to all the data, and best yet, if they're querying it correctly, they can say, just give me all the information since yesterday, and I can parse that. And so you're not doing that. Here's everything that was ever written and a big dump of it, which is going to cost you 1 million tokens. It's just the stuff I need that has changed since yesterday, so that I can go and review it. And you
could you have essentially tiered data lakes? And why I say that is, let's say you want one where you do have that PII for a very core trusted group of people, and have that then overflow, or not, maybe not overflow, but flow into a secondary data lake where you've stripped a lot more out for more just people that aren't necessarily inner circle, or ways that you don't want people to access that data. So you could have one feed the next, feed the next.
Yes, you absolutely can. You absolutely can. You can have two where one is older stuff. So let's just say things that are older, over a year. You can move those Parquet files to a Glacier-like storage system where they're accessed less frequently. So we can recall them if we need to. There's a lot of flexibility you have there, both with privacy and with cost, FinOps as well. But to wrap this whole thing up, the tool you need to kind of bridge the gap from point A to point B is the AWS Data Processing MCP server, which allows your Claude or OpenAI or whatever to actually talk in a structured manner to your data warehouse. So I would recommend the Athena one. You could definitely, if you depend on your flavor, you could go and use glue directly, but Athena's got a really nice MySQL-like syntax that's very easy to interact with. But that's, if you're a C-suite person that's looking to get access to that data, maybe you consider this route. If you're, an engineer and you've got access to that, it's another one. In reality, I mean, if you had enough time, I'd recommend doing really structured tool calls. You give the more room you give the AI models to make mistakes, the more it's going to make mistakes. So if you do a structured tool call, this is what we want to do, especially if there's any updating that needs to be made. And I've said this before, but I recommend you only allow AI to make recommendations that then get reviewed by a human. So it's nice to have, in a perfect world, you could have a tool call that the AI could make all the recommendations it needs, and then someone goes through and says, yes, hot dog, not hot dog, sure, So, yeah.
And you were also talking about, you mentioned Claude and other things. Yeah, you want to be very, very careful with what information you allow third-party AI models to consume, right? Versus, and that's where you may even want to do a restricted subset of the data, because there is special sauce in there in some way, shape, or form, perhaps, even if you've anonymized it.
Right. And even if we're assuming that the giant technocrat billionaires are benevolent and not using our data, only using it.
Surely they are.
Let's assume that they are for this use case. Let's just also imagine you've given your Claude the ability to make requests out to the internet, to book food for you or whatever, buy your lunch, or send emails to people on your behalf, or whatever it is. They could leak that data accidentally. An example I had is I was running Hermes, and I don't think it was Claude. It might have been an Anthropic model I was running on there, but it's decided to use Pastebin to create some type of report. It could have easily done GitHub issues and put credentials in there, but it put personally identifiable information in there. Luckily, it was running inside of a Docker container, so it had very limited stuff, but it had MAC addresses and stuff like that I really wouldn't want floating around the internet. And it did that thinking it was doing the right thing, but it was just making a very, very stupid mistake, as models tend to do. And I saw that, and I mean, that's a hacker's, malicious party's dream.
Yeah, you may or may not have come across various keys within repositories that should not have been there, even if those repositories are not public. That happens all too often.
And they'll read all. So yeah, I was working on the writing for this next week, and we'll probably talk about it next week, so I'm not going to go too much into it, but I was discussing other ways that models could be used for malicious purposes and so on and so forth. But I guess I'm not getting into that one too much right now. Circling back, I would be, if anybody needs help setting something like this up, that's what we do for a living. So feel free to reach out. If you need to get better access to your data, or do something with your data rather than just let it sit there on the disk, or you want to make sure that you're being as cost efficient and speed efficient with your database as possible, that is what we do. So,
or you want to audit your current configuration and make sure there's not any gaping security holes in there.
Yeah, right now, man, InfoSec has never been such a hot topic.
Not that you have, bad actors, but mistakes happen, and sometimes unbiased eyes can uncover things that others are blind to.
Yeah. So, okay, cool. Well, that's about all I've got for today. Dan, is there anything else I'm forgetting right now?
That's what we came to talk about, I believe.
All right. Well, if you guys need any help with this stuff, check out schematical.com. That's the word schematic with an AL at the end.com. Just like in my sign here, which I didn't really show off, but I got a new sign.
And right above your head in the orange box as well.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I forgot you always do that. All right. Well, have a great week, everybody.
Ciao all.